All right, welcome everybody on Facebook Live. This is Steve Barrett, PRWeek Editor-in-Chief, ready to get going with our weekly podcast. And we're in our studio with Julie Batliner, President of Carmichael Lynch. Hey Julie, how are you?
I'm great, thanks for having me.
Yeah, all the way from Minneapolis. Great to have you in the studio. We've got our new equipment. We're very excited about that. You can see it in front of us. New super duper recording equipment, microphones, all mod cons. We're moving swiftly into the 21st century, or is it the 20th? I don't know. No, we're doing well. It's good stuff. And we've got Frank Washkuch here, our news editor. How you doing, Frank?
Good to be here.
Living the dream as usual?
Always.
Yeah, indeed. Always short and to the point is our Frank, and it's the early mornings doing the breakfast briefing. You know, he's time waits for no Frank. So yeah, if you've got any comments, any guests you'd like to see on the podcast, any general comments on this podcast or any others, please append them to the feed. Otherwise, we're going to get going. Lots to talk about this week. Hello and welcome to the PR Week, PRWeek's regular weekly roundup of everything that matters in the worlds of communications and PR. My name's Steve Barrett, I'm the Editor-in-Chief of PRWeek. Guide you through the next 25-30 minutes as we chat about the big issues of the day, the big communication stories, and a crazy week in so many respects. And we've got Julie Batliner here this week, President of Carmichael Lynch, all the way from Minneapolis. How you doing, Julie?
Great, good afternoon.
Great to have you here to find out about your amazing performance over the last 18 months and your new sort of wider role, or maybe not so new now, but anyway, it's the first time we've had a chance to chat about it, so looking forward to that. And Frank Washkuch's here, our news editor. How are you, Frank?
I'm doing okay. How are you, Steve?
All the way from Brooklyn.
Yes. Harsh commute.
Well, sometimes it is, isn't it? Yeah. So yeah, we're going to talk about what we had to start with this story, really, didn't we? It's been I think, a really crazy week in so many respects, following the events of the weekend in Charlottesville, and then the reaction by the president, and then business and its follow-up, and just the issues that brings up across the board for communicators of all types. So we'll chat about that, and we'll chat about Tiki torches, which got caught up in that demonstration. I don't know what you want to call it, but yeah, what happens when neo-Nazis adopt your brand, basically, is the issue for us there. We'll talk about influencers, an increasingly important part of the communications landscape. But how do you validate the influencers you're working with, and how do you know who are good and who are bad, and whether their followings are genuine? And then we'll have a bit of chat about the future of agencies if we have time at the end. But let's start with you, Julie. You've been in the role at Carmichael Lynch Relate, which is the PR arm, since late 2015, and then you took on a role at Carmichael Lynch, which is kind of a more of an advertising creative shop affiliated with Relate. But you had a great year, 47% growth in 2016. Organic growth, not acquisitions.
No acquisitions.
Organic growth. How'd you do it? How are you doing this? This is way ahead of the market.
Yeah, we had a record year, and a lot of things lined up for us very nicely. We had existing clients rewarding us with more growth. We had extended scopes of services and content and social. And we also brought on new clients that we hadn't had before. So lots of nice things lining up that allowed us to have record growth. And
that's brilliant.
Yeah.
And the new clients, what were the most notable ones?
Well, we've brought on Phillips 6676 and Conoco fuel brands. And last year we started working with a fashion retail brand, Evereve. So those were a couple of new ones. We do some work for Best Buy now, which we hadn't done in the past.
And that's a Minneapolis-based retailer, of course.
Yep.
Big centre of retail there with Target and Super Value, I think, also HQ'd in the town.
Yep.
What's the offer? I've often talked about agencies like yourselves, like maybe Olsen, which started out in Chicago, Falger and Morty, maybe in Columbus, that you've always been integrated almost by need. You know, that's what the markets locally have asked you for, but now everything is kind of coming your direction, in that's where the whole market has gone with convergence, integration, etc. So you've got the Carmichael Lynch relationship, and now you have a role there as well. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, we're really lucky that we've had a 55-year-old advertising agency and a 30-year-old PR firm that can certainly and has certainly stood alone when needed, whether it's a creative advertising AOR or media AOR or a public relations AOR. And when a lot of firms decided that they needed to start hiring, people to PR firms starting to hire media planning and buying and creatives, we already had a great setup where we were able to borrow the very best talent because we all sit together in one place and really can get to know our clients and immerse ourselves, and they all know the messaging already. So we can either stand apart or we can snap together for whatever the business objective is. So when we had new leadership coming in and succession planning, we talked a lot about, should we have one president of Carmichael Lynch and Carmichael Lynch Relate, or should we have two presidents? And it made sense with the integration and interdependence that we want to provide to our clients between disciplines to have me in that role over both of our agencies.
Absolutely, and you're also, of course, part of Interpublic Group as well. So you're in a holding company, but you also have that sort of mid-sized feel. Do you work with other creative agencies within IPG as well, or do you mainly work with Carmichael Lynch?
We do. We work with other creative agencies within IPG and outside of IPG. So really it's a client-first approach, whatever the clients need in terms of their partners. If they already have an ad partner, then Carmichael Lynch Relate, our public relations agency, partners with other ad partners, IPG or not. And then, of course, we prefer to partner with Carmichael Lynch just because the clients get such benefit out of it, but we make it work either way.
And are you part of the constituency management group?
No.
You're not. So you're one of those firms that sits outside that,
right? Which
I think PMK, BNC is another one that sits outside.
Yeah, so we have the deep resources, but the independence as well, which is a great situation.
So obviously IPG at CMG has had some stunning growth over the past 2 or 3 years, double digits year on year, which is difficult to achieve. How have you been doing in that time? Well, obviously you've been doing amazingly. It slowed down a bit at CMG this year. Mm-hmm. How's it been for you? How's the first sort of 6 to 8 months of the year been for you?
Really good. We are still growing by double digits. Of course, having a record year, it's hard to top that. Yeah. But for us, it's all about sustained growth and making sure that the new clients and the new services that we're providing and we brought on last year are settled in, getting the very best service. We had a lot of hiring that we needed to do. And so we now have a great combination of really making sure those businesses are getting what they need, but also growing at the same time.
And do you think, does Marcus Fisher is your boss?
Yes, he's our CEO.
Yeah.
Yep.
And would Marcus report into, who would he report into at IPG? Frank Mergentile, yeah. Okay, yeah. So.
And Michael Roth, yep.
And Michael Roth, yeah. So other holding companies have been desperately kind of reshaping themselves, for the new environment, putting it together a more integrated approach. IPG is slightly smaller and has kind of been doing it maybe already, which is why it's prospered. What are the other holding company trends you're seeing from the Interpublic point of view, about the new agency service environment?
Yeah, I think it's moving back to bundling and figuring out what's best for a client, looking at that media agnostic approach and then figuring out what partners can come together and offering that. And I think that IPG is really, really good at that.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's great. I mean, how do you see the next 6 to 12 months playing out? The agency market feels a little bit, I've got to be honest, depressed. We hear talk of layoffs at various holding companies and big firms. We hear, that the industry's down a little, that maybe there's a little bit of uncertainty in the economy generally, so people are sitting on budgets. Marketers are looking to cut costs. So how do you see it playing out?
We're choosing not to participate in any of that stuff and trying to control what we can control, and so hopefully it'll turn around for the industry as a whole. But I think you're right. I think you named some of the issues, and we have to be very flexible and ahead of those things and be offering new solutions based on the threats that our clients have.
Yeah. And do you see your further growth as all organic, or are you looking to maybe acquire, or and are you looking at particular territories globally, or how's that going to play out?
Yeah, mostly organic, but we're always open, especially if there's a need for a client to be in a region. We're always open to that as well.
Okay. And tell us a little bit about Minneapolis. It's a great place to visit, a great market, some really creative stuff going on there, lots of big Fortune 500 companies HQ'd there and other sort of private companies like Cargill. Tell us a bit about the market there in terms of business.
Yeah, we have, I believe it's around 15 Fortune 500 companies in Minneapolis. It's a number 5 creative community, so lots of agencies there, lots of creative people. We have the Super Bowl coming in 2018, as well as we just hosted the X Games, which was really cool. So Minneapolis is having a great moment, and it's going to continue along.
You got that lovely weather as well.
We have lovely weather. We do winter well, and the summers are irreplaceable.
All right. Well, yeah, it's definitely a city worth visiting. So we'll chat some more to Julie later in the podcast. Frank, we're going to talk about the crazy events of this week. Do you want to sum them up, sort of from a point of view of the PRWeek world and the coverage and business?
Right. So just to touch on what happened last weekend, there was a white supremacist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, which is where the University of Virginia is. That was over the planned removal of a statue of Robert E. Lee. There was violence on Saturday. The president made a statement on Saturday blaming, quote unquote, many sides for what happened. That was met with widespread condemnation, really from all sides of the political spectrum. And so on Monday, he made a public statement that more specifically blamed white supremacists, neo-Nazis, things like that. But then inexplicably on Tuesday seemed to walk those comments back and in a rambling press conference from New York blamed many sides again for the violence that happened. So this obviously was not okay with a lot of the CEOs who were on the corporate advisory boards that are attached to the White House. So by yesterday afternoon, a number of the CEOs on these advisory groups had resigned, and I guess Trump tried to beat them to the punch a bit and say that he disbanded them himself, but numerous reports say that's not true. So again, this is something, it's a societal issue. It's something that's a lot bigger than a brand story, so to speak, but it became something that corporate communicators, CEOs, executives had to worry about as the week went on.
Yeah, we should also say someone died on Saturday when a car rammed into a crowd and many people were injured. And some of if you watch the Vice film, which I very much recommend you do, it's about 20 minutes long. Great piece of journalism, actually doing some proper journalism over the weekend.
Yeah, the Vice film is really a public service.
It's fantastic.
When you watch it. Yeah, it's
fantastic piece of work by the whole team and the journalist. I think it's Elle Reeve, which really told the story better than anybody could. And for the president to say there were some fine people marching on that rally, and then watch that film, you really do wonder where he's getting that sort of information from.
Yeah, you wonder how anybody could be thinking that. Certainly if you were a fine person of any kind and you saw that sort of stuff going on, you wouldn't stay.
Yeah, you also wonder about the conversation around the dinner table next time his daughter and her husband are going to be together with him, because obviously his daughter converted to Judaism and she's married to Jewish guy, Jared Kushner, and the chanting, not just by a few marchers, this was by all the marchers, was anti-Jewish, anti-African American. It was disgusting hatred of all types. Julie, we're in the sort of bubble in New York, and we have a certain, we have a reputation for being an elite and not being in touch with the rest of the country. From someone who's living in Minneapolis, what's the sort of view from where you are?
Yeah, really sad situation. Sad loss of life. Sad. The president has been in messaging limbo day by day. But what I thought was interesting that this brought to light, and especially as Frank, you talked about, people started resigning from the council. It was that debate of do you pull out early because of your beliefs and your culture and the purpose of your company and what you care about, or do you stay involved so that you can have a voice at the table and also be in the know for your business reasons? And I'm assuming, not having been there, that the behind the scenes conversation for those CEOs and those companies as things were unfolding was fascinating in terms of those two things pulling on each other. But of course, values always wins.
One thing that I found really interesting from either, and I don't remember which one this was from, but it was either the CNBC or Bloomberg report on it, and both of them were very good behind the scenes, almost like minute-by-minute transcripts of what these CEOs were thinking, was that they were hearing a lot of backlash in their own offices and in a lot of cases in their own homes, that their wives, husbands, kids, whoever were telling them, this is what we want to see you do in this case. And I thought that was really interesting as well.
Yeah, I think, Julie, that's probably why they went on these committees in the first place, because they thought they would be better off trying to influence from within. But when they saw some of those sort of comments, it clearly made it impossible. Where's the line for business in terms of getting involved in these social issues and actually getting on with what they're set up to do, which is to make things, do things, and make money at the end of the day, and employ people, etc. Where is that line, and where does sort of internal comms and communications fit in?
I think it's very blurry. I think you can't have one without the other, especially when you're a B2C brand and your consumers care and want to know transparently what you stand for as a company. So I don't know if there is a line. I think you obviously have to make the right business decisions, but they have to be combined with the right values decisions.
Yeah, I remember the Edelman Trust Barometer this year, Richard Edelman saying around that business now has an opportunity to stand up and make statements and be a sort of force for good, because, to be honest, a lot of elected politicians are not really standing up very strongly. It's been noted that members of Congress have been relatively quiet on this. So is this a time when business has to step up to the plate and do more?
It is. I mean, you look at the roster of companies that just pulled back or have made statements about Trump's statement, and they have a stage, and every crisis is an opportunity to reiterate who you are. And unfortunately, we're all in that situation. We'd rather not be in that situation, but we are. Yeah.
It was interesting, Frank, you mentioned Monday's press conference when President Trump was reading from a script, clearly. And then on Tuesday, he was a much more natural, i.e. it seemed to be Tuesday was what he really thought, and Monday was what he'd been told to say. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment of the situation. And I think that if you saw the TV broadcast of it, you truly almost felt for General Kelly, his new chief of staff, who was looking like he wanted to just fall through the floor as this was happening. So clearly it wasn't planned, and then clearly the staffers who talked to the press, on background of course, who said it wasn't planned, appear to be correct. And worth noting, none of them have resigned yet, though, and that's a bit surprising as well.
Yeah, and in that context,
or maybe it's not surprising.
Well, I mean, General Kelly sort of came in and did try and clean house, and he certainly did change things. He got rid of the mooch and various, and so tried to impose some discipline. But it seems like that is an environment where it's proving impossible to have any discipline. And in that environment, Hope Hicks, long-time sort of member of the communications team, has been moved up to interim communications director. What's your take on that?
Well, it's hard to follow the mooch, isn't it? In all seriousness, she is somebody who's known for not doing a lot of interviews. She doesn't tweet except through a very well-managed account.
She deleted her whole social media history when she started working for the president.
Yeah, she's 28. She was one of the earliest members of the campaign. I think Axios this morning described her as constantly underestimated because of her age, and said to have a very good understanding of Trump and where he's coming from, and that's where her ability to move up the ladder comes from.
Yeah. Yes, not the most experienced communications director ever in the White House, but you do wonder who would want to take that job anyway, don't you? But another angle to this was, of course, these Tiki torches that all the racists were carrying on Friday night when they marched, and that causes another sort of reputation problem for companies like that when a product gets associated with neo-Nazis. Yeah. New Balance, the footwear brand, had this last year when they were kind of taken up as the footwear of the white supremacists. So what did Tiki do about this, Frank?
It was pretty straight and to the point, and this point keeps getting made on political TV and on Twitter and things like that, the easiest layup, the easiest thing you can do in politics is condemn Nazis and say that they're wrong and bad and terrible in all kinds of ways, and Trump has proven unable to be able to do that. Tiki had the right approach. You know, they just went out and said, look, we're against these folks. We really don't want them using our products. We condemn what they stand for, and that's it. And very straight and to the point.
Julie, as a leading PR pro, if a brand gets caught up in something like this, what can they do? Is there a way of sort of maintaining a good reputation throughout? What would you advise them?
Yeah, I think the general public probably understands that they don't have control, but was probably very happy that they came out with the simple and straightforward, transparent statement. Imagine you've built your reputation for years and years being the thing that brings people together in the backyards of the world to enjoy, you know, time and family occasions, and then all of a sudden you're synonymous with something like that is a tough place to be as a brand. But coming out quickly, coming out clearly, and making sure you're reiterating who you are as a brand is so important.
And how do you, as a brand, how do you deal with the fact that, frankly, a lot of people agree with President Trump's views,
sure, and
fair few people agree with the racists? You know, they actually, there's a reasonably large constituency who actually have these same views. How do you approach that as a brand? I mean,
well, hate is one thing, but inclusiveness of different political opinions is another, right? So I think you have to make sure that you are being inclusive of all political views, Republican, Democrat, in between. But I think when it crosses the line into hate, it's a different thing.
Yeah. Do you think we can get back to a stage where we can have civilized discourse, if you like, where people can agree to disagree, but doesn't mean they have to fall out and hate each other? And do you think how much do you think social media is kind of to blame for this in a way, because it's become such a febrile environment?
It definitely has, and it's that whole issue on social where you're friends with the people that have similar views, usually as you do, so you're often getting the views that you already have at times, and we see a lot of defriending when we don't have those views. So I'm hoping we can get back to it, and I have hope for Hope that you mentioned earlier. I would like to see her come in and try to make a difference. It'd be really neat to see someone so young and vibrant be able to do that and make the words chosen more wisely.
It would, that's for sure. I agree with that. Let's talk a little bit about influencers, who play into that whole social media space. It's a big area now. You're not just dealing through mainstream media and third parties like that. You're also talking a lot to new influencers in lots of different areas. But that's thrown up a few issues, hasn't it, Frank, which we saw this week with stories about fraudulent influencer profiles being set up and then actually brands buying into those without checking them out properly.
Yeah, the agency in particular was Media Kicks, and that they said that their aim was to, quote, prove whether or not it's possible for accounts with fake followers and engagement to secure brand sponsorship deals. And voila, they were able to secure brand sponsorship deals, and expensive ones too. So that's interesting. A bit of a test that this agency put out. And I think what it shows is that a lot of companies, a lot of brands they see influencers maybe as this bright, shiny object. They're like, oh, millennials, how do we reach them? Influencers, right? And they're not really vetting these people, or in this case, these bots or these fictitious people.
Sure. How do you stop that? How do you make sure you're dealing with legitimate influencers, Julie, for your clients? Because it's a massive area of growth, isn't it? And it's very influential, but there are things like this going on as well.
Yeah, I know we've moved over the last few years to influencer marketing being a new thing, and we had to get people that were mass influencers that had big numbers, and I believe at some times people were mistaking popularity for influence, and I think we've done a good job as an industry moving back to what's real influence for our target audience. And now there's this whole trend of micro influencers, and we've all been running so fast, to Frank's point. But one thing that I think firms need to do is make sure that they have a very robust process. I know one thing we do at Carmichael Lynch and Carmichael Lynch Relate is we establish a listening first relationship with our influencers and establish a relationship with them online early, even before we introduce our brands to them, as influencers ourselves in especially areas that we have a lot of clients in: food and beverage, home and design, energy, etc. So I think that's really, really important to do first. And I'm seeing a few, I was just reading about for FOHR that there's some vetting companies and sites out there now, but firms need to be doing it themselves. But I think we'll see more of that coming out.
So that's the due diligence part of your agency service. And of course, you can also read PRWeek, where we regularly profile new influencers every month.
Very helpful.
There will be many of them actually at our conference in October, on October the 12th in New York, called Swipe Right. Just a little free plug there. It's a fantastic event, got lots of great people lined up: CMOs, influencers, CCOs, CEOs, and media representatives. It's going to be a really great event. Just finally on that then, how's this going to play out for agencies? We've got this, it feels like we're at a bit of a turning point again, or maybe this is just a natural revolution that's going to continue, but every 12 months the whole thing seems to, the playbook seems to get thrown up in the air and completely change. There are people who are saying that agencies are on their way out. They're going to become extinct. There's going to be a whole new type of agency based on AI, based on machine learning, and I'm sure that's going to have a big impact. So how do you see it panning out, and how do you prosper in that environment?
Yeah. I think public relations agencies were a little lagging and behind in terms of making sure that we had the right analytics tools, the right insight tools that we could collect. And I think PR firms are now up to speed on that, and we got to be using those as much as possible. And I think just like advertising agencies are taking a cue from PR agencies about storytelling and purpose-driven work and credible media, PR agencies can learn a lot from the analytics, the way that creative briefs are written, and get everyone going in one direction. So I think it'll be interesting to watch the blurred lines and the merging of disciplines. Yeah,
was there one or two things that you particularly learned from your creative colleagues at Carmichael Lynch that you thought, wow, that's how we should be doing things?
Definitely. One of the things that I've enjoyed a lot is the brand planning teams and how much they dig into data and insights and what we call at Carmichael Lynch the unfair idea. And that doesn't mean unethical or a bad idea. It means a great idea that the competitors say, gosh, they really unleveled the playing field. I wish I would have thought of that. That's unfair. And really keeping the creative teams dig until they get to that ambition of an unfair idea. And I think PR firms can do that as well with the briefing process.
Do you think creative firms are bolder with their clients? They're like, this is what we think you need to do, and we're going to stand by it. And if the client pushes back, they'll say, no, we think you need to do it. Whereas a PR agency might say, okay, we'll go back and come back with another idea. Is there an element of that in it? And do PR people have to be a bit more firm with their convictions, if you like?
Yeah, I do think there's an element of that, but partially it's because of the difference of what you're doing. If you're presenting an idea that's in controlled media and advertising, it's different than when you're presenting an idea in earned media or handling an issue or a crisis. So I think sometimes we have just a different set of objectives, but for sure there's a lesson to be learned there about taking a bold stance. Yeah,
I remember talking to Harris Diamond, who used to run Weber and now runs McCann, and obviously they did Fearless Girl, and he did say that they'd been to the client, State Street, more than one time with an idea like that, and it took a while to actually soak in and actually gain acceptance, and then of course they went for it, and look what happened. It's been incredible for them.
We have a situation like that at one of our longtime clients, Jack Link's Beef Jerky, where we went in and pitched this idea of feeding your wild side and this campaign with Sasquatch and messing with Sasquatch and that visceral feeling you get of your untamed spirit when you eat beef jerky. And of course at first people were wondering what the heck, but then of course 10 record years of sales growth and exactly what the brand needed at the time.
So that was a Carmichael Lynch
and Carmichael Lynch Relate
idea.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, well, that's certainly been memorable and one of those that's got longevity as well.
Yeah.
All right, well, look, we wish you continued success. Looking forward to more, 47% growth this year? Are we going to hit that again?
We'll see.
You said double digits. So
double digits.
That could be 10, it could be 99. But we wish you well, and thanks for coming on to the podcast, Julie. Great to see you. Thank you, Frank. More great work this week by you and the team. Really
Thank
good
you.
stuff. So keep that up. Yeah, I mentioned the conference. It's a fantastic event in New York, October the 12th. Check out the speakers on our website. We've got CMOs from Facebook and IBM. We've got Manon Matthews and Tim Cost and other influencers. The Girl with No Job. Very popular apparently. So CEOs from Boxed and Minibar and people from Mike and the Atlantic. So it's a really fantastic event, really looking forward to it. And we're also, the PR Week Awards are open for entries, so get your submissions, get working on your submissions. You've got till October the 2nd, but as we know, you have to put a lot of work into those. There's no point tackling those at the last minute because you won't get the eye of the judges. Julie, actually you were a part of our PR Week Uncovered event the other week where we gave tips on entering awards, and there's a great video that's going to be on the website soon from that. What was your biggest takeaway from that day, actually, if you were giving advice, one tip to people who are going to enter PR Week Awards?
Just one.
Right.
Making sure that your research and objectives tie to your results in the story that you're telling. It sounds super simple, but we read a lot of entries that doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's true. So I think you need to start working on it early to make sure and get the right approvals as well down the line to really attract the attention of the judges. That's for sure. Okay, that's all we got time for this week. We'll see you next time on the PR Week.